One of the things we're going to talk about in a second, one of our updates, this was our first James Webb Space Telescope spacecraft model, right? This is the first one we ever did. And we've got an updated version and what I've learned the first time. And that's the beauty of 3D printing and iterative design. If you're a tinkerer, if you're a maker, or if you just want to get as many reps in before you really go all in on a product, on an idea, figure out the things that you didn't know, right? All of those little things, we're able to help bring an idea into reality with that. So we have our Fdm printers, which is just like this one here. This is our James Webb Space Telescope coaster that's 3D printed. This is plastic filament coming out of a nozzle that builds from the first layer up, uses gravity to deposit filament, and then there is the resin printer like the James Webb Space Telescope that goes against gravity and dips a UV light cured, well, a build plate into a vat of resin, and that resin is cured with an LED, with a LCD screen that's got UV light that comes through when you put the layer by layer shape, and it pulls that out of a vat. And so that's really cool for really high detail models, especially like this James Webb Space Telescope model. It's so intricate, and there's so much more that you can do quality wise. It's been a lot of fun to learn. And recently we wanted to try, the resins we've been trying a lot of them are like model resins, right? They're resins for like mini characters, whether you got like a D&D set or something like that. Really high quality conceptual prototypes, and a lot of the time those resins are kind of brittle, right? Like if you the classic thing about resin prints is that it may be beautiful, but if you knocked it off a table, it's going to break into pieces. But that's not true of all resins, and one of the things we wanted to try, because we also have gotten into a lot more of like the engineering and like real life use parts, we wanted a resin that was a little bit stronger. So we tried out this ESUN photopolymer resin. It's their hard tough resin. I'm taking this one out because we haven't touched it yet. The one thing about the resin printing, as amazing as it is an extremely, extremely messy process. And I would not recommend this type of 3D printing if you have kids. I would recommend more the FDM, FFF filament 3D printing, because that one, at least you can kind of teach the kids, it's hot, you shouldn't touch that. You're also going to have an enclosure because some of the fumes. So like, at least that's a little bit more clear. The resin, I'll be honest, if I didn't know as much as I knew about the resin and how bad it could be for you, I have gloves, I have face masks and shields that I wear, and depending on the resin, as you get to the more impressive resins like the epoxy resins, in this case, this one has a distinct odor. And that's kind of the real downside to a lot of these resins is you've got these things that you're curing with UV, and at the end, after you've washed them and you've hardened all the resin, it's fine. But everything leading up to that is you gotta be careful not to expose yourself to this resin too much. I know I work in 3D printing during the day too, all types of different materials, from resins to composites to metals, a lot of different stuff. The resin stuff is kind of its own beast. It's its own thing. And, I know some people who used to work in resin and can't be around the stuff anymore because they were just around it for so much that developed like an allergy to it. So not something to be messed with, but we've got some video from our lab for... We may now have 3 resin printers in the lab, which brings the total of printers in the lab to 8, I believe, across the different technologies that we have, which is just crazy. I mean, this started as something on the podcast that we were talking about. I was just an aerospace engineer trying to graduate and get my degree and move on with my life. And I had a little disposable income, and I figured, hey, I'm going to buy this 3D printer, and it all went from there. I bought a kit, I built it up from scratch, and that taught me so much. And now this 3D printing adventure is everything in my life. It's completely engulfed it to the point where it helps fund this podcast so that we can put this out there. It helps bring our own ideas into reality, right? This James Webb Space Telescope is literally possible because I've picked up designing. I've been designing since I was in engineering school, and that has just carried over to the 3D printer, which is just the tool to make those things real. And that's one of the amazing things. So this hard, tough resin for our new Saturn S Elegoo printer, which is a larger format printer. So now I can print even bigger things. And so we're printing the largest version of our James Webb Space Telescope, and this is V3. So this is the third version of our model. This was the first one. You could see the sun shield flaps were really, really flappy. They really, I didn't really have any reinforcement like geometries in there, so it kind of just did what it wanted to. Still worked out pretty well. And this was the first time I was able to paint a resin part, so I got to experience that. And then we went to V2, where you could see a lot more of the reinforcement geometries that are in there. And this is the next level, making it even more precise, making it so that even more of the model is higher quality. And then I decided, with some changes, what I didn't like was the original design of the 18 gold panels. And I really didn't like how that assembled. I had another piece that was going to go inside this, but the fit of that was it was going to take too long to figure it out. So I figured, well, let's just paint the entire back of where the primary mirrors are, and then we'll just put that piece over. But I really wanted something that was a lot more panel and less of like the defining lines between all the hexagons. So for V3, we used that third version of the design where it's going to make assembly a lot easier for me because we want to put this up on our Etsy store. This is going to become a product very, very soon, and we're in the final stages of going through that. And so this is the biggest thing I've ever printed on the resin printer, on our largest resin printer. And this hard, tough resin is really kind of like a hard rubber. It's really interesting. And so I printed it. I have basically three parts. We have the secondary mirror and these three poles. We have, and that there's the ring around all 18 panels, which are now one piece that are going to get installed. So we'll paint each of these and then assemble it. And the cool thing about the resin printing, which, again, thanks to some help from some great friends like Andrew Sink, who we're going to have here on the podcast soon. You can follow him online, another 3D printing guru that's out there. And with resin printing, you don't even have to think about glue necessarily, because what you can basically do is take some of the wet resin, coat it between the two parts that you want to bond, and then just put UV light, and that will actually cure again, and it'll be the same bond as the rest of the part. So that's as good as it gets, really. So assembly on this final version should be a lot better, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you guys. But the resin is really interesting. I haven't had to change a lot of the settings since the beginning, which is marvelous and wonderful, and I'm sure there's a lot more that I can learn from there. But this resin definitely has a smell, and I'm glad that I have some kind of a setup to pull out any kind of fumes or any extra vapors that come off for this type of thing. But yeah, that's what's new in the 3D printing lab, our V3 JWST, and we're getting into better resins and really expanding the possibility of what's out there. And I'm looking forward to kind of focusing on some projects a little bit more so that we can really get into the details of design and moving with a project with 3D printing, and what are we learning as we build along the way. I know we do a lot of that here, but I would love to do things a little bit more focused. So that's what I'm working on. So follow us at AG3D Printing. You can check our website out at ag3d-printing.com. If you want to get a free quote on your next project or whatever it might be, check that out there. And our Etsy shop if you want to help support the podcast and our lab. To help us go to things like another future Artemis launch, or to go see more rockets, because I need more rockets in my life, that's for sure, check out ag3dprinting.etsy.com for more.